Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Nice to see you all. Nice to have everyone here together as we celebrate this special Shabbat. Now, as we all know, this is a pretty surreal time. We are now starting our second year of this pandemic. And although the vaccine is coming into view and more of us are receiving it in our arms, we're still keeping our distance, wearing masks, and taking precautions. While the CDC is loosening its regulations, we know that there are variants and we must maintain our vigilance. Even as we start to consider in-person indoor activities for a limited number of vaccinated people, still wearing masks and 6 feet apart, we are aware that outdoor services and programs will be easier. As the weather warms, we hope that you will join us in a week on Sunday, March 28th for an outdoor Pesach service, followed by another one the following Sunday, April 4th, the final day of Pesach. While these will be Zoomed for all those at home, I pray that we have meaningful moments together in our beautiful courtyard where we can safely gather under the sun. I invite you to please click on the link to register for these experiences that were in several emails, including the Shabbat Shalom email on Thursday evening, so that we can ensure there's enough interest to really invest in these experiences. We will be entering a strange new phase of this terrible COVID time, where we will be starting to have more in-person moments while still having Zoom for those whose health, vaccination status, or their geographic distance will require them to join us via Zoom. Since it's so easy to Zoom into shul, it will take a little bit of time to wean us off of the convenience. And I ask all those who are able and willing to start planning for a little bit of extra time to drive to shul. The truth is, Zoom is so easy. I could be on a walk with my dog Bamba and suddenly remember it's time for minyan. Stop in my tracks, turn on my cell phone, and poof, I am transported to shul where I can recite the Mourner's Kaddish for my father who died 2 months ago from COVID. While I am in my home or in my office, this magic continues. 1 second I'm on a pastoral Zoom, and then instantly I am transported to someone else's home for a bat mitzvah interview. And then I turn on a dime to a planning meeting with my staff, followed by a fundraising Zoom. It's like Scotty on Star Trek, where he beams people from one place to another. Except in this case, it's 100% safe. And I never hear Scotty call out, "I can't do it, Captain. I'm giving her all she's got." That's my best imitation. I've been trying to practice. I always arrive safely wherever I need to be at light speed, although I actually never leave the comfort of my desk. Zoom has made the impossible possible. I now officiated baby namings of newborns all across the country. And even my own father's Shiva was filled with friends and family from all over, especially Israel. Truly remarkable. That brings me to last week, when I was able to attend a conference where the teacher was sitting in Jerusalem and the students were all over the world. Attending this gathering without the expense of a flight, a hotel, or any food was fast, cheap, and instantaneous. It's really wild. The teacher was Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, a luminary on the far left fringe of modern Orthodoxy. And he was teaching in a conference organized by Hadar. Yitz, as he is known, has a beautiful approach to our faith, where he sees it rooted in the intrinsic value of every human being, that every human being is created in the image of God. Building on the beginning of the Torah, he elevates the concept that every human being is created in the Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, and therefore each person is a unique soul of infinite worth and fundamentally equal to everyone else. Expanding on this idea, Yitz teaches us that we must see the divine in every person and thus approach them with love, taking care of them, recognizing their infinite value. It's a really beautiful notion, which he understands at being at the core of the Torah, explaining the root of every mitzvah, every commandment. And thus, every mitzvah, both the ethical and the ritual, hones not merely our souls, but our moral behavior, teaching us to treat each person as a divine gift. That means we approach everyone, as he teaches, out of a place of love. Now, this is certainly not an easy ideology to put into practice, but it is surely worth the effort. For example, in this week's parasha, Yitz approaches the Korban Chatat, commonly translated as the sin offering, one of the sacrifices, in a really unique manner. Building on the scholarship of the great biblical scholar Jacob Milgram, Yitz elucidates Milgram's understanding that a Korban Chatat should be understood in a different manner than we have always understood it. Instead of seeing a Korban Chatat as related to the Hebrew word chet, meaning sin, which of course most translations, including ours in the Eitz Chaim Chumash, all utilize, Milgram teaches that chatat is actually related to a different form of this verb, lechateh, meaning to purify. Thus, this offering is more properly called a purification offering. And so then we have the question of what, in fact, are we purifying? Yitz points out, quote, you might have thought that a chatat brings a purification from sin, so that the difference is merely semantic. But, in fact, this sacrifice is brought for other reasons. Many of the cases requiring a chatat have to do with a person who, having become impure through contact with the dead animal, but not going through the purification as soon as possible. Thus, this person has increased or extended the sway of impurity in biblical Israel. What does impurity have to do with sin? Why bring an offering for being in a state of impurity? It makes some sense that the problem of impurity would be followed by a purification offering. But what is the connection to sin? And Yitz explains which cases require a chatat. And he brings a great example. If you witness a crime and you're told to report it and you do not, you have then violated the tradition and you must bring a chatat offering. Now, of course, this wasn't an action. You didn't do anything, but you chose not to act. And Milgram then explains that the purification offering is not merely for the person who brings the chatat sacrifice. Rather, it's for the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary that the Israelites took through their 40 years in the wilderness. And therefore, it's also connected to the Beit HaMikdash, to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and even to our sacred spaces today. The Mishkan dwelt in the midst of the Israelites, and it represented the Shekhinah, the divine presence among the people. until the people offer the chatat, this negative energy caused by not acting builds and builds up, damaging the holiness of the space and the community, eventually causing the divine presence to leave the Mishkan. Thus, if we allow indifference to run rampant, it becomes the dominant experience, impacting people more and more. We learn that the sacrifices were a kind of guardrail, maintaining the ethical core of the community. With inaction, our Mishkan, our holy spaces, including our own shul, and even this Zoom shul, become replete with a form of spiritual pollution. As the prophets warned, the very Beit HaMikdash, the holy temple in Jerusalem, could become a lifeless sanctuary without God. And then the Babylonians could enter and destroy it at will, which is, of course, what happened 2,600 years ago. Rabbi Greenberg reminds us that impurity stands symbolically for death, while holiness symbolically represents life. Unless impurity is checked, God will leave us. Therefore, we must act before impurity or even death becomes entrenched and dominant in our society. Parshat Vayikra, our Torah portion, helps us realize that by choosing to be a bystander is a major offense, which can spread, poisoning a community. But being an upstander, speaking out against injustice, however, brings holiness and purpose to our community. As we continue to move forward through this most complicated time, let us remember that apathy and inaction in the face of injustice corrupts the very core of our community. It pollutes the physical sanctuary, and in these days our Zoom shul, causing us to lose sight of the Torah's values. Instead, let us lift up the sacredness of every individual, remembering that each person is in fact created in the image of God. Shabbat Shalom.